So that is basically saying you scale your infrastructure in such a way that you'd be able to have more users using your server, like at that particular point in time. If you scale up to 8,000 users, right? So you can see you now need to maybe increase this to from 2 gig RAM to maybe 16 gig RAM, now 32 gig RAM. Your CPU, if it was maybe a particular specification, maybe Intel Xeon, a particular Intel Xeon, you might have to get a higher one. So basically, you just had to continue scaling up your infrastructure. And sometimes keep in mind that these devices sometimes are also not the most configurable. Some of them might actually max out on you on like 32 gig RAM, or in fact, like let's say 64 gig RAM might max out on you on those phones. So what if you now want to get up to 128 gig RAM, right? It means you have to continue purchasing, and this was a lot of money is being spent. But this was before the cloud. Now, during the era of the cloud, what eventually happened, or what happens during the cloud is so what the cloud made possible, right? And this is, first of all, with the launch of services like Amazon EC2. After we had Amazon EC2, then we now had auto scaling groups. Let me start writing that like a doctor. Auto scaling groups, right? And this was one of the things that Amazon would use to, whenever you asked how are you accomplishing high availability. Some of the other high availability HA this thing was the load balancer. The load balancer is also part of how AWS is able to provide high availability in their data centers. So let's start actually discussing like during the cloud. So what happens? How does high availability now work, or scaling? How does scaling? Does someone have a question?
Sorry, I accidentally omitted.
Okay. So if you're not saying anything, just you can mute yourself. If you have a question, I would recommend we even type it in the text box so that I can attend to them once they are all collated together, so we don't interrupt the class. It's about a 1 hour class now, and we need to be done by then. Okay, so without any interruptions from a couple of, yeah. All right, so to discuss, during the cloud, what happened during the cloud was you had services like EC2. If you don't know what EC2 is, EC2 is it's called Elastic Cloud Compute. EC2 is Elastic Cloud Compute. So the EC2 instances, which in this case are your servers. So if you are new to cloud, just think about EC2 as just physical servers, right? So physical servers that come with certain specs too. They have CPU, they have RAM, they have networking, and this thing, disk space, if you choose to call it that, right? So, but now we went into the fact that, okay, for us to be able to scale these servers now, internally in the cloud, there needs to be a cloud, I would say, can I use the word cloud native, or a cloud-centric way, or a cloud-only way for us to be able to scale this EC2. So that's when we now start including things like for example, to achieve HA now, like I said, to achieve HA in AWS, the major ways is through an auto scaling group. And the load balancer. Right, so I'm not here to talk so much about the load balancer today. We're just going to be talking about the auto scaling group and doing lab on the auto scaling group. But I'll still explain to you nonetheless. I'll show you on a high level, how to load balance, or how the load balancing works, or how load balancing and the auto scaling group gets to work in the high availability together, right? So let's say let's put the cloud here. Let's say this is AWS, We're not going to mention maybe it's a specific VPC or maybe it's a specific AZ, or so we're not going to do that. Just imagine that this is your AWS, right? And this is just to help those who don't already have like a background into what I'm saying. Just imagine that you have your EC2 instances, which are your servers, like I explained initially, hosted on AWS, right? If we're hosting it on AWS, right, the challenge here is you have, let's say you have users. This is a user on his device, right? The problem here is that you only have, in most cases, right, how you would be able to reach this, right? It's probably going to be some DNS name, and that DNS name is going to be converting to an IP address, right? So if that is happening, it means that you just have only one device, like serving your entire idea. Let's call this idea, like I said, maybe giftbox.ng, right? So with that being said, it just means that you have just one device, and this doesn't necessarily make it really highly available, does it, right? Because now if this device should fail, or let's even say this entire AWS data center, which sometimes actually does happen, is a risk in cloud. But yes, sometimes an availability zone actually has some issues, or people are not able to reach. It means that if this guy is not able to serve the request to these users, right, no one will be able to serve the request, and that's actually a bad thing. You don't want people trying to access your website and not being able to reach it, right? So the way AWS plugs in high availability is by, for example, you can create another EC2 instance. I'm explaining load balancing first. Explaining load balancing first now. So you can create another EC2 instance, right? Host the exact same application here. So it's going to be the exact same, right? But now there's going to be a load balancer here. In Amazon, it's called ELB, an elastic load balancer. That load balancer will technically, in what we call in Nigeria, a leg, would have one leg in each of the, what do you call it? In each of the chassis that holds, or in each of the servers that hold your application for the giftbox.ng, such that if users try to contact the application now, right, they're still going to be using a DNS, but it's going to be the DNS of the load balancer, not of the device directly, or what, unless I'm also dropping, there are a lot of things I'm skipping here. I'm assuming you already know how DNS works and what do you call it, an A record and all of those, but just bear with me, right? Just know that what you have here, what the user can access here is also a DNS record, which you can map, like an A record, which you can actually also map to giftbox.ng. But for example, if we're using something like this, like the EC2 instance directly, funny enough, we can actually still have the DNS record of it and map it to giftbox.ng, but I mean, we usually get an IP address directly. The key point here is that load balancers only give you a DNS address for mapping. It doesn't give you a direct IP address to map so that your users will be able to reach to it, right? So this is just load balancing, right? But now let's actually look at what an autoscaling group would do. An autoscaling group, let's assume again, this is our Amazon data center, right? And then we have one server, one EC2 server hosting our idea. Can even be a WordPress site or WordPress server, it doesn't really matter, right? As far as it's an application that can be reachable over the internet, right? So, but like I said, having just one person and to your thousands of users, maybe I should put more users here so this looks more descriptive. Users, right? Having thousands of more users directly contacting this EC2 is not really scalable or highly available, is it? Because like I said, if something happens where this thing fails, or where you even have a bug, or you're even what they call maybe the physical hardware where the giftbox.ng, where the server is being hosted, now has an actual issue, which sometimes does happen, then this is not actually highly available. So how do we counter this with auto scaling? I've just explained load balancing on top. Let me show you what an auto scaling group would do in this case, right? So an auto scaling group is kind of like, for example, you can pick up an EC2 instance like as such, right? and say you want to make an autoscaling group of this EC2 instance, right? And the autoscaling group would come with something called an autoscaling group policy. Now, those policies are based on different things. So, for example, I can say, as part of the policies, that whenever more users are connecting to this EC2 instance, let's say, we can say whenever the CPU utilization of this specific server that I'm hosting Givebox right now reaches, let's say, 80% traffic, I want you to automatically create another server to be able to share the load in that essence, right? So whenever users are coming in, they are not going anymore to just one, they're not just going anymore to just one device. They have another device for them to also go to bother to get. So basically, we have one central auto-scaling group, and that auto-scaling group will continue growing. And the great part about the fact that it grows, so if I'm setting a policy to say, okay, 80% CPU utilization, you should grow into another server, create another physical server, and then what happens is that it also replicates every single thing that is in Givebox, like basically it replicates Givebox.ng into another server, and then you can have two concurrent servers running your application, right? But this usually fits best when you have like a load balancer sitting in front here, such that the users are connecting to the load balancer, and the load balancer gets to be the one who shares out the load between the EC2 instances. And if there's more CPU utilization amongst these two, maybe another 80% CPU utilization, you can still say, okay, create another one. So to continue creating, the more traffic it gets. So that way it scales. So it gets to the actual point where we're talking about, where like the device would actually scale, right? So I think if that is clear, I'll be jumping. I'll just skip through some slides now to touch on some things maybe I haven't explained in my whiteboard session. And after then, we'll just quickly jump in and create an auto-scaling group to scale our servers in this pattern that I have just talked about. Okay, sorry, just give me a second. I'm trying to share my PowerPoint. Okay, so let's just quickly skip through this. I got this off of the internet, but it would give you a better sense of what we're trying to accomplish here. So scalability means that an application or system can handle greater loads by adapting, and there are two types of scalability: vertical scalability and horizontal scalability. So that's the part I actually I didn't elaborate on. Let me. So there's something called, if you're talking about scalability, there's something called horizontal and vertical, right? So for example, now, vertical means you have 2 gig RAM. Let me try to explain it in this very direct way. 2 gig RAM. Maybe let's just use, I'm going to be using normal desktop specs now. So you can still get to understand the idea, right? So 2 gig RAM, let's say you're using an Intel i3, Intel, yeah, let's just leave it at i3. And then you're using maybe okay, let's even set that SSD, let's just say maybe 120 SSD, right? So, and then networking, maybe you have just 1 gig of networking for networking interface speed, right? Vertical scaling means that this server, which is currently hosting your application or your idea, right? When it's basically that thing I spoke about initially here, right? So here, this was vertical scaling. If you saw that the way I drew out, so we had this networking to 100 gig SSD, this amount of RAM and CPU, right? And then all of a sudden our users are increasing 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, right? If I'm just increasing the specs of my server, what it means is I'm doing vertical scaling. Now, on the other end, horizontal scaling is what I just explained to you, right? Horizontal scaling is what your auto scaling group is. That's create another server beside for it to be handling requests along with me too, and then create another one subsequently too. So those are actually the main key things, and you need to know about that. So vertical scalability also means that increasing the size of the instance, right? So for example, your application runs on a T2 micro. I'll show you what a T2 micro is. Then scaling the application vertically means that you're running it on a T2 like large, so like a larger version of that specific one. But we mainly use this for non-elastic applications. So for example, where if you're talking about best practices, they'll tell you that, okay, vertical scaling, if you're talking about non-distributed system, you keep on hearing this word when you're talking about scalability, distributed systems, right? So this is not really great for distributed systems because you are vertically scaling, right? A distributed system is more like what you have here, right? So this is usually more recommended. The vertical scaling, horizontal scaling is where you actually have your auto scaling group. Your vertical scaling is also used for distributed systems. And this is used for non-distributed. That's non-distributed, by the way. Distributed systems are supposed to be a doctor in another life. Okay, so I think if that is clear, what else do haven't I mentioned before we jump into the labs? Horizontal scalability just means increasing the number of instances for your application. This is actually very common for web applications and modern applications. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, so I think we can actually jump into the lab now. So like I can actually also show you some things because I like to teach directly from the GUI. It helps to learn better. I'll be sharing that screen quite shortly. Give me a second, let me. All right, can you see my AWS dashboard?
Yes.
All right, awesome, great. So the service that we're looking for, and I'll also just do a little bit of backup, what do you call it, like baseline prerequisites here, because I understand some people are here and have actually never used AWS before. So I'll just do a little bit of a groundwork before actually getting into the auto scaling group, and I'll do that shortly, right? So when everyone talks about cloud computing, AWS, this is basically what AWS is this one dashboard that you're looking at. And this one dashboard has a lot of services. So a major part of actually understanding cloud computing is understanding, first of all, who your cloud provider is and what services that they have, right? So for major of the cloud providers available right now, GCP, Azure, and AWS, I mean, they probably have the same services. So for example, now under AWS's compute service, we have EC2. Microsoft has their own version of EC2. GCP also has their own version of EC2. So, and EC2 for us at this place is these are our virtual servers in the cloud. So whenever we want to get servers in the cloud, that's where we come to. If we're looking for storage in the cloud, these are AWS storage services. If you're looking for databases, this is where you get them from. If you're looking to do some things around networking, CloudFront or Route 53, right? This is where you get your content delivery content. If you're looking for machine learning, right? If you're looking for VR, if you're looking for robotics, developer tools, right? So it's been broken down, and the major part of knowing your cloud provider is knowing exactly which particular cloud provider to choose or to pick based on the services that they offer and based on what your application needs to do. So the particular service that we're talking about, autoscaling group, is going to be under the compute service of EC2, right? We can find it under EC2, the EC2 compute service. So yes, let me also just briefly explain what EC2 dashboard is. So you can look at the EC2 dashboard. I currently don't have any running instances. It means I don't have any servers online at the moment. This is also where you can do different launch types. You can do sports requests. You can do reserved instances. You can get your own direct hosts. But most people usually just launch their instance directly. And this would usually give you like an on-demand package, if I put it that way, right? So you can also save your volumes here. Basically, these are your hard drives on AWS, and these are your snapshots. It means if you take snapshots of your hard drives, they would also come up here, right? But you can see it's below here that we're actually coming to, right? So you can see these are the tools for high availability for the EC2. Okay, just before I do that, just let me try to launch an instance. I'm not going to launch it to the end. I just wanted to see what is entailed in launching an EC2, because once I launch an EC2 now, I would have to create an auto scaling group for it. So I would just like to do that like now, so you can see. So I'll just be creating, I'll just be launching an instance. What I'm doing right now is in essence, just launching an on-demand instance, right? Most times I make use of the Amazon Linux 2 AMI, because that's this is the one that Amazon basically guarantees and says, this is my stuff, this is my version of Linux, and you can run anything on it, and it's optimized for my environment. So why not pick it? But if you have some other choice, if you want to pick some other stuff, you can actually pick Red Hat, SUSE Linux, you can pick anything from here. So we'll just select that instance type. So we'll just select that AMI. This is the AMI, the Amazon machine image that's being selected. And then next here, this is where you start picking. This is actually where you choose the type of devices that you're going to pick, and note that each of them have their own CPUs and memories. So this is what I was talking about the other time, right? So under here, most times that you're going to pick is going to be, if you want to do under the free tier, if you want to use your free accounts, I'd recommend you use this T2 Micro, and then it's going to give you one virtual CPU and then 1 GB of memory, right? So the next thing you can, so scaling up, so yeah, scaling vertically just basically means I picked a 1 CPU, 1 gig RAM before, right? Maybe later, like 6 months time, I have more traffic. I will then come to this exact same application and scale up by saying, I want to move from T2 Micro to T2 2x large, or T2x large, or T2 large, right? So that would actually be that scaling up, right? But that's what we're doing today. We're actually doing horizontal scaling. So it's a very different instance. Awesome. I want to keep. Let me just go and check that I picked. Okay, yes. So it was just warning me I picked a different instance type. How many instances do I want? Just one. This is the VPC I'm going to put it in. That's my default VPC. I have some other VPCs, but I'm just leaving it here. So in case you're watching this video and you're trying to replicate what I've done, you could also use your default VPC. I think every other thing can be left the same. Check that the auto assign IP is enabled. And then you can paste in some scripts to launch the application directly. You know what? Let me just do it since I'm already here, right? I'm going to put in a script now that is going to run. It's going to, once the server is coming up, it's called a bootstrap. So I'm actually even getting into more than I'm supposed to do today. Well, yeah, it's called a bootstrap script. So you put it under user data as a text file. What happens is that once this server that I have selected the AMI Linux server, which is the AMI type, and the instance type that I've selected 1 gig RAM, 1 virtual CPU. Once it is creating all of this, right, it's going to automatically run these commands into my my instance, right? So what would already happen before I turn on my instance, I would have already updated the operating system. I would have already installed Apache. I would be echoing. I'm basically typing this HTML scripts, right? And I'm saying, put it into this file, /var/www/ in the HTML, then index.html. So I'm technically creating a file called index.html and putting this is treated server, right? So let me even just change this is now change it to this is treated academy webinar tests. Let me just leave with that. And then I'll start the process. I'll start the HTTP process, and then I'll enable it, right? So after that, I'm just going to add the storage, and the storage is 8 gigs is usually enough. We don't need more than that. You can add tags. So name it whatever you want to name. So I'll go back a little bit. I think I did something very quick there, so in case I don't want you to miss it. So you can add tags. Let me delete this tag now, right? So tags are also some other stuff that you have to learn deeply when you're talking about the AWS sysops, right? But because it's something that they use for, like, for example, if you can see tag editor, you can use it for resource grouping and all, right? But like I said, that's for the sysops. But the minimum tag you need to know is that you can add a name tag. What do you want to name your server, right? So I can just say test webinar server. So it will just come up, this, you just know, like, this is the name for it, right? And lastly, there's something called a security group. So a security group just says what is allowed. It's like a virtual firewall that comes with every AWS instance. Just think about it like that, right? So on this, my virtual firewall that comes with every AWS instance, what do I want to be able to come in and go out? So you need to keep in mind with security groups, and all traffic is allowed out. Okay, so hold on. Okay, so sorry, hold on. I was just accepting one more person into the class. Okay, so think about security group as a how do I put this now? I just said it some minutes ago. As a virtual firewall, yes, for each of your AWS instances, right? So let me actually get back to the drawing board literally. So maybe this might make more sense to you. Okay, so think about a security group like this. So this is a security group. Or look at, let's say this is AWS Cloud again, like I said, just bear with me. And inside this AWS Cloud, I have my EC2 instance. Right, so on this EC2 instance, at every single time you do an EC2 instance, there's always some sort of virtual firewall here that stops everybody from being, that is able to at least filter access into that particular device or into this particular chassis. So this might still be what is hosting your giftbox.ng. When I say app, don't think about it as like an app. So for example, our website, www.treatenacademy.com. That's also an app, right? So that was an application that was developed in JavaScript, right? Backend is in Node.js. I think the front end should be React, if I'm not mistaken, by the developers. I don't develop. So anyway, there should be some form of virtual firewall that says who can access this EC2 instance or who cannot access it. So on this virtual firewall, which is what we are calling a security group, SG, security group, right? We are allowed to, what do you call it, say what comes in and what goes out. Now I'm saying by default, everything is allowed to go out. That means everything is allowed to go out from your EC2 instance. Like all connections through this wall I have put is allowed out. Everything. Out is everything, but in is now where you now start having granularity. You can say you want to allow SSH in. So you can say you want to allow HTTP in, meaning you want people to be able to browse. Because obviously, if it's a web server, you need HTTP to be able to come in. If you also want to be able to configure it remotely, you need SSH and all of that, right? So this is just the main core idea I wanted to explain in the security group before going too far. Okay, give me a second. Let me just find the screen. So yeah, back to my screen. So we're back to this screen and we can see, okay, we're back at the security group. So at the security group now, I'd say, let me just create a new security group. I'd say 310, and this is September, right? 310. But you have to make it more descriptive actually. So you can actually say maybe like an EC2, you need to make it more descriptive. I'm talking about it from if you're in an office or if you're in a company and you're a solutions architect, you need to make it more descriptive so that you know that this is the security group that is for this particular groups of servers, right? I just can't think of anything now because we are doing a test. So I can just do maybe 310 webinar test or something. Tests. The description you can add more description, you can leave the description. Doesn't really matter. It's for you actually. So the SSH, you can see SSH, all of this is all in, there's no out, right? So for example, and also, so for example, look at this here. So Amazon has this very neat feature where if you want, what they call it, traffic to only originate from your device, right? They would allow you to put, say, my IP. So they have automatically picked up my IP. This is my direct home IP currently that I'm on my Wi-Fi, right? Please don't try to hack me. But we have the custom one, which is the one where you can put custom where you type manually, or you can just put anywhere. Sorry, hold on, let me accept someone else into the class. All right, the guys that are just joining would actually soon be done with the class, but everything is recording and is also currently being streamed live on YouTube. So that is also going to stay there recorded. You can check us out on YouTube and you find this exact same recording there. So, okay, let's continue. So we have this security group now. Like I said, I would like to do from anywhere for now because the problem is I didn't buy this IP. Right, so it's probably going to change sometime soon. Probably maybe next week, next 2 weeks, right? So I'll just leave it to anywhere for now. So any IP address can SSH into it, because if you mess up with this, it's possible where you don't have access to your server anymore. You don't want that to happen. So the other one we're going to add is the HTTP. I'm just going to go a bit head on. Yes. I realize my public IP will be showing on YouTube, but like I said, this is a NATed IP. This is the service provider is to protect us on that one, and I didn't buy that particular IP. I don't have any server directly hosted on it or any direct this thing. So it's quite more difficult for any bad things to happen. And also, like I said, since I didn't buy it, the service provider is probably going to change the IP next week, upper week, or the rest. So someone just chatted me off that, so I just needed to clarify. Anyway, so review and launch. I'll just review and launch the SSH and the HTTP. So I think I don't even. It's funny how after I was just saying this, my keypad isn't responding. It seems like someone has hacked me. Okay, that's maybe it shows this particular. Maybe I've stayed too long on this window. This might actually clear off. That's clear enough. Anyway, I'll quickly just do it again. So I think we all remember this. The reason why I selected that one. I think I'll just get the bootstrap script one more time. Sorry, give me a second, let me. Oh, okay, someone was trying to join the class too. Ola Kunle, nice one. Say it wasn't you. Anyway, great one. Okay, so this is the script I had pasted before. I just said, but I had changed this to this is 310 webinar server. I think I did something like that. I don't remember what it was. But I think we all get this part. I'll just add storage. I'll leave it at 8. A name tag. I'll just say webinar server again. Webinar test. Anything actually can always work. This one, webinar security group, webinar SG. So you can do webinar SG. You can then add HTTP. And from anywhere. So that is it. I'm now in the review part, so I'm supposed to review. If all goes well, okay, yeah, there's a key pair part also. So this key pair, you can't misplace it. So you either create a new key pair, or you choose an existing one. I have a couple of existing key pairs, so I can use maybe my AWS key pair, my AW key pair, KP. So if you don't have it, immediately, this is quite a note of warning. Always make sure you download your key pair once you finish creating it and keep it somewhere safe. There are some times where you might need some specific access to that device and you can't gain that access because you don't have the key pair. Hold on, let me accept someone else into the class. Okay. So with that being said, I'm just going to launch my instance. Yes, Olajide, I think you were just joining. So like I said, we are live on YouTube. Triton Academy is on YouTube. So if you're looking for this recording, you can go and check us out on YouTube. It's currently being streamed on YouTube live. So if you like to get the recording of the class, just check out our YouTube page and then you should find it immediately after the class. Just type Triton Academy on YouTube. Okay, so I'll just continue. So I'll view the instances now. So if all goes well, after the status checks, we should I should just be able to copy this IP address here or this DNS address, like I was telling you earlier on, and just paste it, and we should have this is 310 webinar server. So it hasn't yet been done because a lot of things are still coming up. With that being said, let me just go straight to an auto-scaling group. The reason why I came here is because I wanted to actually pick up an AMI name. So this might not make a lot of sense until I do this. So I'll pick this AMI, copy it, and then it will make sense to you in like 2 seconds. So before creating an auto-scaling group, because what an auto-scaling group, if we are being honest with ourselves, is at the end of the day, it's just a template. I'm saying this is a specific server I have right now. I would like this exact same server to be coming up every time maybe it hits 50% CPU utilization. It's just a template. So how do we create a great template? Amazon has done a lot of changes around this before. I think before they used to call it launch templates, not launch configurations, but they've done some changes, start calling it launch configuration, right? So you can see, I think this is just actually recent. The old launch configuration console is no longer available. So this would be the new one. Let's actually launch a launch configuration, right? So let's call this webinar launch configuration. Like I said, as a solution architect, you need to be as descriptive as possible. You need to try to, so that even if you're not around, someone will be able to know exactly what this launch configuration does. So it depends on your organization and where you're working and what you're having to do with those technologies, right? So I'll just go for the AMI right now. You see, this is the reason why I copied the AMI, right? The problem is that it's difficult for me to actually find the particular AMI that we wanted to use. So I don't know, why is this Ubuntu selecting? I didn't select a new Ubuntu. Anyway, that doesn't matter. What we actually, the AMI that we're looking for, because it's difficult for us to actually find those AMIs here. So the AMI we're looking for, this is the actual AMI, and then I'll just select it. If I didn't copy the initial time, I wouldn't have been able to find that AMI. It's quite difficult to scroll through and find. That's why I had to copy the particular AMI name. So the instance type, I'm just going to do my normal T2 micro. Just type in here T2 micro. Yes. Okay, spot instances is not something you are aware about. I'll just keep this. This is not important for this webinar. So yeah, sometimes you might want detailed monitoring, right? If you do this, they're going to charge you for this. So be careful of that. But you cannot. There's also still the generic CloudWatch monitoring that is not detailed. Detailed means that every 1 minute they'll be monitoring it for you. But there's a normal free one that AWS has that within, I think is within a space of usually five. So I think it's 5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, let's move on. For some advanced details, so you can look here. I want to also do the same thing I did initially, right? So someone is now going to ask me like, okay, how can I have like, how is it that the server would have the exact same specification over and over again? Don't forget that we have our script for the bootstrap. You remember I explained the concept of bootstrap to you just now, right? So now I'm going to paste the same bootstrap script. So I would now say, maybe I'll just so that we know that this particular one is our auto scaling. So I say this is our ASG, right? Yes, so something like that. So now I'm just saying that inside this launch configuration, where I am saying this is the launch configuration name, this is the specific image I want to use. This image here is just a Linux image. That AMI, the same one I selected to create this, or which by the way, I think this should be done. If everything works perfectly in the last one we just did, if I should refresh this, we should have a server. Oh, I didn't even refresh it, it just came up on its own. So you can see that this is up. I didn't go into the server to configure anything. I had just written it in the bootstrap script, right? So this is one server currently running a bootstrap script, but we're trying to create a new server now for the auto scaling groups to automatically scale whenever something is shut down, whenever something is broken. So like I said, this is our launch configuration for the auto scaling group. The launch configuration has an AMI. The AMI is the Linux itself. The instance type is the physical hardware I said I want to run it on. I'm going to skip all of the spot instances, but under advanced details, because I want this specific, all the servers that come up with this stuff to have this, this should be the application that is running on it. A web server that just says, this is our auto scaling group, right? Or they may make that more descriptive, Academy. Academy auto scaling group. Now more elaborate. So only assign public IP. Yes. Public IPs are going to be assigned to it. The root volume is 8 gig hard drive. Free tier, that one's normally there. So selecting the security group. There was a security group I had created before. I think let's select the same security group because the same thing applies, right? So I think we had called it test webinar security group, if I'm not mistaken. It's in, let me see, created 2020-07. Okay, no, that is not recent. That is not recent. There's one I created quite, okay, yes, this is it. 2020-09-19, yes. So this is the auto scaling group I created. Remember that this auto scaling group was the one that allowed in IP addresses from anywhere and the SSH2 from anywhere. Don't bother trying to what they call it, to do a DOS attack on my servers, because immediately after this webinar, I'm going to just stop those servers and those IP addresses or those servers will no longer be up. So that is for my physical, that's for my server in AWS, I mean, right? So after that, we'll still have to select a key pair. create. Okay, no, I don't have to create a new key pair. You might have to create. So create. I'm just going to still use my existing key pair and acknowledge I have access to it. And then I'll create a launch configuration. If everything is fine, I should have something called a webinar LC, webinar launch configuration, that was created on September 19, 2020. All right, so that's the launch configuration. Now to the final act of the show, like a magician. To the final act of the show, where we create our auto-scaling groups. This is what it looks like to create an auto-scaling group, right? The auto-scaling group name, I'll just call it a webinar ASG. The launch template here that I'm going to use. Which launch template did we just finish creating? We didn't create a launch template, it was called a launch configuration. So like I told you, and it's because Amazon changes, most of these guys, Amazon, GCP, and the rest, they change things a lot, right? So up until some time ago, we're still using something called launch templates, but I can see that there are no launch templates. We didn't create a launch template. What we created was a launch configuration. So I have to click here to switch to showing me launch configurations to use, right? So once I switch it here, I should be able to see my webinar LC, my webinar launch configuration. And once I click on that, it automatically tells me, it knows that, okay, in this auto scaling group I'm trying to create, the launch configuration I'm using is the webinar launch configuration. The AMI ID is the same one I went to copy that time and pasted. That's the Linux. The instance type I'm going to be creating this auto scaling group is T2 micro, and these are going to be the security groups, right? You can also check out the particular security group to make sure that you have that on point. The next thing is what VPC are we going to put it in? Okay, someone is chatting me up again. Let me also add. Just give me a second. Let me allow someone into the class. Awesome. Luckily, I don't really get your question. I'll come back to it. You said, is there replication amongst Elastic instances? Not certain what you mean, but like I said, I would let me finish this lab and then I'll just allow all the questions to come in and can just clarify it from there. So which subnet do I want to put it inside? I don't have any specific subnet in mind. All I know is I want it to be in default VPC. But I've also chosen any of these other VPCs that I've created, but default VPC already just comes, and which is, I'm guessing, the same thing you're going to be using. So it's fair for you to just allow it that way. Subnet, I don't have any specific subnet I want to put. So for example, now, also keep in mind that each of these subnets are different availability zones. So I can choose a specific availability zone. I want to put it A, B, C, D, E, F. You can choose anyone. Keep in mind that my A might be different from your A. Your B might be different from my B, right? So even if the fact that both of us are coming from the exact same region of Northern Virginia, that might be different, but it doesn't matter. The most important thing is just it's an availability zone, and each availability zone, this is a key detail in AWS, each availability zone has its own subnet, right? One subnet, one availability zone. But one availability zone can have up to 3, 4, 5 subnets. That's quite key. So I'm not going to select anyone. I don't know if it's required actually, or is required. So yeah, I can just select anyone then. I put it in A. Do I want to enable load balancing? You can see how I was telling you about, like, this works really well with load balancing and auto scaling group. So imagine having a load balancer, like the traffic comes. Okay, so let me even, I think Zoom has it. Yes, I can annotate. Awesome. So look at this. This works too perfect when it comes to load balancing, right? So imagine where you have this load balancer they're asking me about, if this my auto scaling group has a load balancer. Now in the middle here, I would have a load balancer, right? Now that load balancer is helping me to load balance between 2 different subnets. So imagine this is divided into 2 different subnets. This is subnet 1 and subnet 2. I'm giving you a real proper scenario of what deployment is like, real life, like how people get to do things. So we deploy a load balancer that, like I said before, in the Nigerian sense, has 1 leg inside each availability zone, hence each subnet. So this is also a new availability zone. It means that even if this Amazon data center physically goes down, you still have, okay, wait, before I even actually get there, let me go back a bit. I'm jumping ahead of myself. So yes, so we can see that here now, for example, I can now then have an auto scaling group here that might start with just one server, right? But I'm saying whenever maybe the load balancer is giving me too much traffic, please scale. Whenever the load balancer, so you can continue scaling in one availability zone while also having another server that will also scale from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. This actually does look like a loaf of bread. It's weird. Okay, so this can scale 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this will be your auto scaling groups, and this will be your auto scaling group. So this will be a perfect way to actually deploy to scale and to also utilize your high availability and to also be able to scale internally. So you've made this elastic in some sense. You've also made this elastic in some sense. And you've also made sure that when users are coming in, because this is where users are coming in from. So when users are coming in from different places, they just hit the load balancer, and the load balancer, which takes in the traffic, also starts separating in between the different availability zones, depending on what is required here. So I really hope that's clear. Actually hope that's clear. So I'm just going to continue a bit here. So I'm not going to enable load balancing because that's not this webinar. Let me join. Someone else just joined again. Let me allow a person to join. So load balancing, are we going to be doing health checks? Let's just leave it at the health checks for the EC2 instances for now. We're not doing load balancer. Do I want enable group metrics collection within CloudWatch? That is actually a, what do you call it? An optional. Well, you can also add it, so because it doesn't cost you anything. So you can see here, right? So you can enable it without being afraid that they will take any extra cost. By the way, all of the things that we try to do in our webinars and in our classes, we try to make sure that you can accomplish them at home too, when you're on your own without having to put in any credit card or make any payment or have to spend quite any sums of money, right? So everything I'm doing right now, you can follow it word for word if you just have your own AWS account, right? So next. So this way it starts getting really fancy and nice and where people might like it, right? So what's the desired capacity? So for example, now I can decide that my desired capacity should be 2, right? So that means for that, this is treated like for this kind of server, right? I'm saying in my auto scaling group, I desire 2, but the minimum that should be there should be 1. And the maximum that we should have should be 5. You don't have to set all of those ones. You can actually just set the specific ones you want to be granular. You can see it's optional, right? And then you can also say you don't want any scaling policies. Sometimes I like to use it just to show in my class, right? So for example, now there's something called the target tracking scaling policy where you can track that CPU utilization I've been telling you about. This is actually it. So this is scaling policy name tracking, target tracking scaling policy. They are usually just 4. So you can say you want to track CPU utilization amongst your servers, right? Whenever CPU utilization goes up, maybe the value, if it's 50%, you want another device. So we can just set it like this. Or you can set it that if the application load balancer request count per target, if it's getting too much, right? You can also set, you can say average network. If you're saying, okay, average network in or average network out, that sort of thing, like download and upload from the server. You can also set those, like, okay, this is when my application should scale, right? I prefer just using the generic CPU utilization, right? Mainly, actually. And the reason why I'm actually doing this also should be, I think I'll just change minimum capacity to 2. Let me leave it at 1 for now. The reason why I just do this is it's quite easy to test out the CPU utilization. There's a command where you can run on a server and then crash the server in a way to basically you just run the command on your Linux server and then I'm not going to tell you the command now. That's maybe part of your homework, or maybe if you join our next webinar, I'll inform you of that. But just know that there's that tidbit. Okay, so I'll just click next here. Notifications, it means there's something called SNS. I don't know how to start explaining SNS to you right now, honestly, but it basically just says it's what. Did I just close everything I had been? Sorry, that was my bad. Let me just quickly do that again. I was trying to go back. I think no, mistakenly closed it. Same things I did before. I'm just not going to give the explanation again. Desired capacity. Right. Next. Okay, I was supposed to click previous. So SNS notifications just are emails that will be sent to you. So for example, I can set it in such a way that whenever my auto scaling group starts reaching 80% or 50%, like I've set it there, I'll receive an email being the admin of my company saying our servers are being overutilized. So you can set those notifications to come to you as a push notification, as a text, as an email. That's what SNS can do. Just that's SNS on a very high level, but we're not going to do anything with it. It's optional. We also don't have to add tags to it. It's optional. Like I said, tags is mainly for a sysops operation person. So this is what our review is like. An auto scaling group using this launch configuration, going to be launched into this VPC, into specific availability zone and subnets. No load balances. The health checks are going to be done every 300 seconds on EC2. This is also quite an important point, but I can't really delve down into the nitty-gritty of why health checks are important now. Just note that they are important. Enable monitoring, I've enabled it. The desired capacity, that means I'm always hoping to have 2, but the minimum I ever want to have is 1. Then maximum capacity should be 5, right? Then the scaling policies, I'm saying execute policy when as required when average CPU utilization is at 50%. So that's what I had also set, right? All of those have been set, and then I'll just go ahead and create my auto scaling group. This actually does take some time. So I think I would allow the questions to start coming in now while this is coming up. Yeah, this will actually take some time. It's updating the capacity. So right now we've created our auto scaling group. If I select on it, what you would see is, okay, this is the same part we just looked at now, but let's look at the activity. So look at the activity. Automatically, inside this auto scaling group, we check what is going on. The status is in services. Description, launching a new EC2 instance, launching 2. So 2 different EC2 instances are currently being launched at right now. Right now, if I should refresh this, hopefully maybe we'll get new stuff, but it's actually, it says successful. Okay, give me a second. I don't think those instances can come up that fast. That's too quick. Let me see instant management. Really? Hold on. AWS wants to bust my head. Let me go to the instances and see if they're actually up there. So yes, questions can start coming in. You could send it as text. Sorry, as you could put it into the chat. It's quite surprising. Okay, so yeah, you can see that 2 instances have already started launching. This is the initial one we launched, right? Webinar tests. This is the one that has, this is Triton's webinar server, right? But when we're talking about these other 2, you can see when they were launched, you'd see that the time that they were launched is quite different. This other one was launch 11. This is 12 what? I think the time is 12:15 now. So I'm guessing that should be 12:14 or something close. Okay, 12:13. 12:13. So you can see we are just launching them now. We're actually just launching them now, but the checks are still initializing. So it's the reason why we cannot yet access them. So that might still take some time. And if we go back under our auto scaling groups, we would see that I'm actually quite surprised. This is quite fascinating that it was that fast. Maybe it's also because it's a T2 micro, and the server I'm running on is just an Apache server. It's not that heavy. So yeah, can click on the auto-scaling group again. Are there any questions? I'm not hearing any questions. If there are no questions, I think we'll be ending the class in a couple of, 2-3 minutes. Like I said, if you're looking for this class, some of you might already be watching on YouTube, and I'm sure you might already be tired of hearing this, but there are people currently in class, and I'm just trying to let them know. You can find this on YouTube, the class from beginning to end. Okay, so it is successfully actually launching new. It has actually successfully launched new instances. The automatic scaling is still there. No particular action has been set yet. Instance management, you can see that there are 2 instances. Okay, so I have a question from Olakunle again. It says, is there replication amongst elastic instances? If I have horizontal scaled up setup that has 3 machines running, if a file is added to one, will it replicate? No, it's not going to replicate. No, it's not going to replicate. So that is actually for another class. So I see the question that you're asking for, right? So it's actually quite easy. There are things called AMIs in AWS, right? So your AMIs are your images. So what you can actually do if you want to have the same, what do you call it, this thing consistently across, right, is that you can turn your organization OS into an AMI, right? So you're just going to be spinning up AMIs. So anything you need to have inside a specific this thing, scaling group, you turn that machine into an AMI, and then that's what is going to be in your auto scaling group. But it actually just means that whenever you need to make changes to it, you just make changes to the AMI itself and then send it across again. So that might be quite challenging. I want to quickly also show you something for you to know what an auto scaling group is, because I think it doesn't make much sense to a lot of people. You can see that these 2 servers are done launching now. I can pick up the IP address, and if everything that we did went well, we should have Cheating Academy auto scaling group server. So that's one of them. Let me pick the other IP address. Pick the other IP address. So give me a second. Let me drag this, it's blocking me. So Cheating Academy auto scaling group. So the exact same thing is on both of them. But what happens now, look, I'll just choose one at random. This one, I'm going to terminate it. I'm going to just watch this. I'm going to terminate it, and then let's see how our auto scaling group handles this. Keep in mind that I have said that my desired quantity for my auto scaling group should be 2, right? So that's the reason why it is kind of self-healing. It would heal itself, right? And this is usually where the beauty of an auto scaling group actually comes into play, right? Before 2 minutes, actually, so I won't even see it here first. Very soon, I'll actually be getting another instance actually coming up very soon here. But where you would actually get to see this first thing is under the auto scaling groups. When you go and check the activity that is happening in the auto scaling group. So I click this auto scaling group now, and I go to activity, and I see that, oh, hold on, it hasn't updated yet. Should. Or is it instant? No. It's still terminating. I think it's actually still terminating, funny enough. Okay, yes, so you can see. I think that actually took some time. Auto scaling groups are usually, and okay, yes, also, so because of the health check that we gave was almost 300 seconds, so that's quite some time, right? So based off of that, the auto scaling group will quickly spot that, oh, I have a deficit of 1. So you can see that in progress under the activity, an instance was taken out of service in response to an EC2 health check, indicating that it has been terminated or stopped. So if I should refresh this again, you should get another one saying an instance was started in response to a difference between the desired and actual capacity, increasing the capacity from 1 to 2, right? So that is basically it. What that just means is that if I should go now, if I should check under my instances, I would say that one has been terminated and another one is coming up. So look, this is terminating, and another instance which automatically just came up on its own. I didn't do anything, and I'm sure, hold on, let me refresh. Okay, so this is the server, this particular IP address is the server that we've just taken off, but I'm sure this one should still refresh properly. So this is still refreshing properly. So let's just go there and see that after a while, once we get the IP address of this guy, this new guy that is coming up, this one that's still initializing, it would also open the exact, this is treated and this is an auto scaling group. It's going to take some time because it's, so it's already up. So ladies and gentlemen, that is actually all for our class today. That's all for our class today. Okay, another question again before I leave from Ayadamope. Says, hi Annie, question. By default, what category of scaling does AWS auto scaling fall under? Is it scaling up or scaling out? It's scaling out, scaling out. So scaling up mainly means what do you call it? Adding more RAM gig or more hard drive or more networking or more CPU, right? That's scaling up, and that's mainly used for like maybe non-distributed system like databases. So if you have a 2 gig database and you want to increase it to a 4 gig, right? That's usually how it works. Like that's scaling up or scaling vertically. But if you're scaling out, it means that you're basically creating the same instances, the same instances from left to right. So the exact same instance that you have in maybe in number one, if that instance, you now start setting some policies and saying the policy, if one particular device is maybe handling too much traffic, too much traffic, then we should be able to, what do you call it? If one device is handling, hold on, just give me a second there. If one device is handling too much traffic, then we think you should scale out, meaning horizontal, meaning create another server that would handle the exact same traffic. Unlike scaling up, which just means add more RAM, add more CPU, add more that. So depends on the scaling up or scaling vertically, like I said, for databases and non-distributed systems, mainly for the kind of database and non-distributed system. But if you want to do distributed apps like what we have, like normal any front-end application, just think about any front-end application whatsoever, it means that you're going to have to leverage more on scaling out using the auto scaling group. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, hope that answers your question. Would that be all, guys? Any other question?
No.
All right. Thank you to Ayodamope. All right, have a great day, guys. If you would like to have more of these classes, please leave a comment on our YouTube channel or on any of our social media. This actually guides us to know what particular topics to do, or which particular, if we're doing cloud computing this week, or if we're going to be doing security, or what particular classes we have. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.